Hey guys, welcome to another Lost Sanity film podcast.
Welcome.
Movie review. I did it again.
Movie review.
Movie
there we go.
review
Easy for you to say.
edition. Next time I'm going to make him say it. And today we are reviewing
Pet Sematary, the remake. and various creepy noises.
All right, so if you guys didn't know, this movie just came out 2019. It came out in
it did.
April, and it's adapted from a
Stephen King novel.
Yes.
One of his one of the more well-known novels, I'd say, in his collection.
Right. And so some of the other Stephen King adapted films would be obviously the original Pet Sematary, The Shining, It.
One of my all-time favorite horror films, The Shining. Not so much It, but The Shining.
Right.
Sure.
But some of the other well-known ones, Misery, Carrie, there's some...
Cujo, Children of the Corn.
Right. Very, very, very famous. I mean, a big part of why this film works is because it is a Stephen King adapted novel, adapted screenplay.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And with the advances in technology, I felt like this was a film that was ripe for a remake. And I am happy to report that, in my humble opinion, they pulled it off, and they pulled it off well. I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. And I think it all started when I saw the initial trailer and I saw John Lithgow was stepping into Fred Gwynne's role, who I feel like Fred Gwynne was like the shining star in the original film. And not just because he was Herman Munster and everybody loved Herman Munster, but because his actual performance in the first one really carried it. And then, of course, we'll talk about your favorite scene that they carried over in this film. But getting really quick back to John Lithgow, the fact that they cast him, brilliant move. I mean, you can't go wrong with John Lithgow. He's a phenomenal actor. So that got me excited.
The casting was there.
Absolutely.
Well, first, before we get into the meat of the film, out of 5 stars, Brian, what is your vote?
On a strict like horror viewers scale, I would give this one a solid 4. I really would. I thoroughly enjoyed it again. And the casting, it got me really excited to see it. Just like the trailer alone, I was like, all right, I'm so stoked to go see this with you, because they really, you can even see in the trailer how they hit upon the elements in his book and kind of like hearkened to what I believe Stephen King had in mind when he was writing it. Just the scenes from the trailer, from the cat, from the creepy children in masks walking to the burial ground. By the way, this review does contain spoilers, so we should say that. I was ready, and they delivered. They really did.
I'm going to give it a 5 stars. And the reason why is because I'm keeping it simple, but I can't even tell you in the last year how many horror films I've watched, and they haven't delivered. They've left.
Sorry. I didn't enjoy Us. I'm sorry, guys.
Well, it just, a lot of these horror films, some of them are really good, but this film in particular, films aren't getting made, and they're definitely not going to the theater unless you have an audience. And so Pet Sematary works, number one, because it already had an audience. Everyone already knew Pet Sematary. So there was that, familiarity.
Definitely.
And I think with the trailer, but with the entire film, they were really capable of bringing that familiarity. So, and it built up anticipation, that famous scene, and it's actually in the trailer. So, and holy shit, what a trailer, right? That trailer,
perfect
when
trailer.
that truck comes by, and you think, you know the story if you saw...
The ground is bad. Just everything about it.
If you saw the original Pet Sematary, you know that the kid dies. And honestly, even if there wasn't a Pet Sematary numero uno, you knew from that massive truck and the expression on the mom's face that one of the kids or one of the parents, I mean, most likely the kids, was going to get killed.
Yeah.
That was kind of
sure.
there. But then they also, they just they really brought it home in terms of familiarity and going into a film, paying
Because the environment was a character in the film. It really
right.
was.
The environment, the world that Stephen King created. And so, for all of our filmmakers that are going to be listening to this, really take note of the fact that there's already that familiarity. That's why you have Dumbo coming out. You have Pet Sematary.
What's old is new. Again.
Right. And it's not just that. It's the fact that we watch this as kids. Now we're grown-ups and we can pay $15 for a movie ticket.
Yeah.
And now with online streaming, it's that important. So if you're making a film and you're taking out, as an independent producer, if you're taking out money, recognize that. Recognize that the likelihood of getting it to a, full United States or worldwide release for your film is very unlikely unless you have a huge following of some sort.
Yeah. And I have to say, just on a sheer reviews, from a review standpoint, they changed the film from the original, and I really enjoyed the changes that they made. And I know the diehard fans are going to be like, oh no,
what were the changes?
Don't change my film, because a lot of people get attached to originals. And, I have to say, I'm not a big proponent of remakes. I'm really not. So this one was a pleasant surprise because it's normal. That would be like saying, oh, they're going to remake Jaws. No, don't touch my classic.
Right.
But this one I felt was fantastic. I love the changes that they made. For instance, in this one, and again, this does contain spoilers, instead of making Gage the one who was killed and hit by the truck and coming back, the
little boy.
They chose the daughter Ellie, and what's her name? Jit Lawrence was the actress, and she was wonderful. Yeah. I mean, for a child actress, she hit it home.
Every single character had a massive character arc, and I have to say, who was the main guy, the main actor? Brian will tell you. I'm horrible with names, so
well, I'm not always Jason Clarke.
I've never seen him in a role like that. I was so
he
surprised.
Was great as the brooding sort of,
but also
anti-religious father.
Right. He was so scientific and so logical in the beginning, and his story arc is he becomes completely illogical. And it was so fascinating as a filmmaker to see such rich roles. And it should really show the audience that when we have these amazing character arcs, it's like a story within a story within a story. And that's what was so exciting to watch. The discovery of these characters, becoming something else.
Oh, I would completely agree. And just, the casting was fantastic up and down the board. I mean, I didn't have a problem with anybody they put in this film. But from a filmmaker's perspective, what I loved about using the daughter, as she's a little older, obviously, than Gage, her little brother. And I felt in the original, because the boy was so young, they couldn't really adequately get across that, he was this evil zombie kid, because they had to use these quick shots. He was too young. He couldn't pull off the performance. So you can see in the original film how they use these very quick, crisp shots to try to get across, he's this creepy, evil little spawn of Satan crawling out of the dirt. But this little girl could pull off the acting performance that was required of this role, which was, she stole it. She really did.
Yeah, she was... Honestly, her character arc was amazing. And as a little girl, you're already looking at her thinking, wow, she's a powerhouse little actress.
Yeah, she really was.
Good for her. But every single actor there was not one actor, including the cat.
Yeah. Cat. I loved the cat.
The cat was great.
The cat was great.
I have no
cat.
idea how you could work on set with the cat.
I don't either. But without it being CGI. This was not a CGI'd cat.
And it jumps on their lap and, just does things that were, and there was really not anything and that's what I love about Stephen King.
Not a ton of CGI.
Right.
Yeah. I am not a fan of CGI unless it's absolutely necessary, and I was pleased that there was very minimal. I'm trying to think of maybe there was one or two scenes, but I honestly, I can't. Nothing's jumping out at me right now that's saying, "Oh, that was CGI."
And
can't.
really, the heart of the story comes down to, a father and his approach to life, which is logic and science. He's a doctor. He's very, but he has such tremendous love for his family. He just moved to this new home, this new location, so that he could spend more time with his family. And then, his daughter, spoiler alert,
Ellie.
but yeah, his daughter ends up being killed. But they
Yeah.
already know about this supposed pet cemetery because
John Lithgow kind of explains the local lore in
Right.
his
And
so perfectly creepy way that he can
Right.
do it with this great cadence he has in his voice. So
do it.
Well, I'll just chime in with it randomly. And what a performance by the wife.
Oh, absolutely.
The
and that's
character
the thing.
Rachel, played by Amy Semetz, I think I'll get her name right.
Yeah.
But and for those of you again who love the original film, she does have the creepy sister with the twisted spine, which lends to her very interesting backstory, and they did include those elements in this movie. So you won't be disappointed.
I don't really remember the first film, but this one felt a little more fully loaded.
Yeah. And the original, yeah, go ahead.
And I think that really comes down to there was so much heart in this film. And so many times I go into horror films, and again, just, finishing that thought, it was about this, father and this family, and they had such tremendous love in the family. And so the father, even though he's extremely logical and scientific, his daughter dies, and all of his beliefs, his entire personality goes out the window, and he goes into survival mode, and it happens to every single character. And it's like, oh shit, you're watching a movie about what happens when someone you love might be hurt or affected, or you might lose them. It really, logic does go out the window.
Yeah.
And what would you do? What would you do for someone you like, especially a child? So to watch his performance and his arc, and then the wife's, and and it's interesting because you think of her as the more emotional one, and then she becomes the more logical one, and it's fascinating to see every single person's journey. And nowadays, when I go into a horror film, I don't feel like I'm like, sometimes they forget that it's still a film, and it's this is my personal perspective, but I see every film, I don't care if it's horror or romance or comedy, as a love story. And in this film, you get the love of the family. You get how, and I want to feel that.
Yeah, from a familial standpoint, and not and no disrespect to Peele, but I don't
Are you
necessarily.
talking about Jordan Peele?
Yeah, Jordan Peele. I don't necessarily want a political message in my horror films. I just want to be scared. I'm one of these wacky people who I just want to be scared, and if you can tell that in a clever way, wonderful. But to me, just,
I don't care what environment you create. What I want is believability, and I want the characters that I'm rooting for, I want them to fight for something. And in this film, bringing it back to that theory that every story is a love story, I mean, if you look at, for instance, this Pet Cemetery compared to Us, I mean, it has so much heart. And when you are emotionally invested in a horror film, and then someone's ankle gets chopped open, I had to cover my eyes.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
in Us, people were getting stabbed, and I was still watching with a blank stare because I was an outsider. I wasn't in it. I wasn't invested emotionally.
Right.
I mean, this isn't a comparison.
Right. Yeah. No disrespect to Jordan Peele.
No.
I mean, he's clearly a brilliant, filmmaker,
what he does,
and
he
he
does
has his
right.
set ideas. That particular film, that wasn't, Us was not my cup of tea. So.
Right. But that should really tell you, but when I think of Get Out by Jordan Peele, what was it? It was a love story between the girl, and that made a lot more sense to me because it was the white girl and the black guy, and they were in love, and her family was racist, and he loved her so much he was willing to overlook these things in her family that might have been red flaggy.
And one thing I do love about what Jordan Peele does is he gets these great shots, these creepy facial shots of the actors and actresses, and it just like it has an ability to unnerve you, and I do respect that about him. I think he's very good at that.
Well, speaking of shots and cinematography, what did you think of Pet Sematary?
Oh, it was brilliant.
It was great.
I loved the whole, the overhead shots of the cemetery and the burial ground, and pulling, getting great shots of the community as they're moving, and you really felt isolated too. Like where they were moving to was completely isolated, and they did such a great job of making you feel like you were a resident of this town, just kind of looking from the woods
and you also liked the town, like it looked
you did,
like so it was beautifully
Maine,
shot.
right? I believe it took place in Maine.
It was beautifully shot, and it had what sometimes a lot of horror directors forget, but you also have to capture the emotions of the characters. You need those awesome wide shots of the action, but this not just horror directors, but also action movies. You don't want to get too invested in the action or what's happening from an objective point of view that you're forgetting that we have to feel. We have to empathize with the experience of the story in order to feel a part of it. And again, I bring this back to me saying my favorite film was Wizard of Oz, and I used to cry at certain points in the film. The magic of movie making is feeling a part of the experience. When we're outsiders, we're not invested, and we're not going to pay $15 to be outsiders.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think it was... I loved it. I thought it was really great. I think it's the best horror movie that I've seen this year.
Yeah.
The acting was phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then we can't leave out, the major thing. It's a Stephen King, it's like, he creates these worlds that are like our worlds, but what if we took our world, our reality, and then just twisted it a little bit? That's The Shining, right? Normal world, but then they twist it a bit and everything goes crazy.
Yeah, and much like Rosemary's Baby as well,
So all of us...
Which was not a Stephen King, but still, that was one of my favorite films.
I think why that works and why that's so terrifying is you don't have to make a leap of going from our reality to a completely different reality and then it getting twisted. It's very much like, oh yeah, that's something that I could believe. This happy family moving to a new place, yada yada, and then, all of a sudden something's a little bit off.
Yeah.
So it's not such a stretch. And as the film went along, it just got more twisted, more twisted, more twisted. And what I also appreciated about this one, I don't really know if it was in the first one, but there was so much paranormal activity happening around them. It wasn't just the cemetery and the dead cat or the dead daughter. It was actually things happening all around them.
Yes. Oh, yes. There was definitely some homages to the first one, like the father getting up in the middle of the night and going to the graveyard, being guided by the spirit of the boy he tried to save, which was in the first film, but I felt they kind of just delivered it more effectively in the remake. And one thing I do want to just throw in there just before I, so I don't forget, because I'm getting older, so sometimes I forget little details. But what I loved in the film was a great performance by the little boy, actually, in this one, Gage, who, the character Gage, I don't know who the actor was, but I loved the closing scene because that director to me showed that he had real guts, because when you decide that nobody is safe, including the little, children and pets, in a nutshell, at the closing scene, the family has now become undead and evil with a lust for killing, and they surround the car that their youngest, Gage, was left in so they could go seek the daughter and the wife, and absolutely love the closing shot as them surrounding the car, and then the little boy kind of looks to look at his father, and they're going to go in, and
the little boy's screwed.
He's screwed. And I just respect that immensely for a director willing to go there, because once You know,
He was the only, like, innocence, true innocence in the entire
Yes.
story. And at the very end, they're leaving you with the impression that he's not safe.
No.
And also, they're leaving you with an impression of Pet Sematary 2, or I don't know, what is this
possibly,
technically?
yeah. I mean, yeah.
I mean, I would say that this is definitely, this remake was better than the first, and that's why
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I give it the 5 stars,
And
because
technically, I
was-
should. Yeah, no, I don't want to interrupt you, but technically, there was a Pet Cemetery too.
Oh, I
but,
didn't know that.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was one of those direct to.
Direct to DVD
Yeah,
or
it was
video.
whatever it was, but it wasn't. It wasn't. Let's just leave it at it wasn't. But go ahead.
But
Finish your
I would
comment.
say in the last 2 years is the revival of, these Stephen King remakes that are actually better. Dear God, do not touch The Shining.
No.
And the only one
they tried on TV and it did not work.
Yeah, they tried
No, you're not going
Carrie.
to touch Jack Nicholson's
They tried
performance.
Carrie, and it was
Carrie's another
a
one.
flop.
Yeah, it was
I
a
mean,
flop.
I don't know. Was it a flop?
I didn't hate
I
that
didn't see
one
it.
actually. I didn't dislike that remake. It was not as creepy as the original, obviously, because the original was in the 70s. And I'm sorry, but every horror movie made in the 70s is going to be better than any remake
Was
they
Pet
put out.
Sematary made in the 70s?
No, that was 80s.
Okay.
That was like 89, I think.
Okay.
So
that's
late
something to know
70s, you
for-
can't touch that gritty, creepy feeling, and even late 60s
For all the filmmakers, if you're trying to do a remake, because fun fact, there were several directors on this film, and none of them had like major names.
No.
None of them were, whomever, Spielberg, even though Spielberg would not do this, but they weren't major names, but they definitely had the backing of major producers. So what they did was they already in the indie film community made a name for themselves by making really incredible films, coming together and somehow magically being able to, get on board with these heavyweight producers and this movie that already had a huge following. So this is the machine that makes star directors. This is how it's done. You need a boat to sail.
For sure.
And you can't just go from 0 to 60, but they were capable of doing this by already proving their talent and their worth and then being able to rise to this level.
Well said. Well
But
said.
for all of the, horror or any type, but I would say specifically horror, if you're trying to do a remake, if you're trying to get yourself attached to it, do not do it from the 70s. Go into the 80s, because it seems like those are the
80s
ones
were
that are
ripe for remakes there.
all right.
Unless it's Poltergeist, which was a terrible remake, terrible remake. But
We still have opportunities, though. There's a lot of
exactly,
things. And again,
exactly.
it's about, we have all of these online video streaming options, subscription networks. It's that much harder to get a theatrical release. So knowing that, I know so many filmmakers that come to our festival. They're like, we've spent hundreds of $1,000s on this film. Where can it go? We want a theatrical release. Well, maybe you can get it in a few locations, but it's just not that easy any longer. It takes a lot more than that to get a worldwide or even a national release of a film.
That's why we're very indie pro. Go indie.
And that's also why I give it the 5 stars, because it's not
Absolutely.
easy to make something like this. It's not even easy for the film studios these days.
Yeah.
So, remember that, filmmakers, that there's a lot that goes into these things. I'm really proud of this production because it could have been really shitty, but it's not. It's really well done. And yeah, I'm excited to see what these directors pop out next.
I absolutely agree. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it gets 2 thumbs up from us. And by the way, if you're listening to this and you have a strong opinion one way or the other, we respect that too. You might have seen this movie and hated it, or seen one of the other films we mentioned and really loved that, and you have a difference of opinion, and we welcome that, because at the end of the day, it is completely subjective, but we're trying to give our opinion and help any up-and-coming filmmakers out there.
Right. And I will also say, just so everyone knows, the directors were Kevin Kolsch and Dennis Widmeyer.
All right.
And then cinematographer was Laurie Rose. Obviously, the producers, I mean, there's quite a few, but Lorenzo di Bonaventura, that's huge. Steven Schneider.
That is not Ace Ventura, Pet Detective. That's
right.
Lorenzo.
Right. And Mark Varraden. I don't know how to say that. But the composition was amazing by Christopher Young, cinematographer Laurie Rose. I believe that's actually a male, but the editor was female, Sarah Brochar. She actually did Sky Captain.
We love female artists, female directors, writers.
She did. Everything. She did The Post. She did Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow. So for all of the female filmmakers out there, there are females that are working at this level. Take this movie in particular as an inspiration for you, because if you're female and you have the talent, then you have absolutely 100% the ability to make it to this level.
I would completely agree with that.
All right, so that's our review of Pet Sematary. Let us know what you guys think, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
And thank you so much for listening.